For the last few years, the same headline keeps coming back again and again. Internal combustion engines are dying. Petrol cars are finished. Electric is the only future. Scroll social media, open the news, watch any automotive YouTube channel. The message is always the same. Production cuts, factory closures, brands announcing full electrification dates like ticking time bombs. And behind all of it, one recurring villain in the story: environmental pressure. Governments tighten regulations. Cities ban older cars. Activist groups block roads, vandalize dealerships, and demand an immediate end to combustion engines. Automakers are pushed into a corner where adapt or disappear isn't a metaphor anymore. It's policy. From the outside, it looks brutal, almost surgical. Major manufacturers are already scaling back ICE production. Some engines are quietly discontinued. Others survive only with expensive updates, particulate filters, extra sensors, complex exhaust systems that cost more than the engines themselves. What used to be simple, durable, mechanical is turning into something fragile, over-engineered, and politically inconvenient. And that's exactly the point. The pressure isn't just technological, it's ideological. Eco-activism today isn't only about emissions data or life cycle analysis. It's about narratives. Combustion engines are framed as symbols of the past: noisy, dirty, irresponsible. Electric cars are sold as moral progress, not just transportation. If you question the timeline or the practicality, you're immediately labeled as anti-environment or anti-science. That framing works. Very well. Car manufacturers don't want to fight activists, regulators, or public opinion at the same time. So they comply. Publicly, at least. They announce bold electric futures. They set dates. 2030, 2035, the last ICE we will ever build. Headlines explode. Stock prices react. Politicians applaud. But behind the press releases, things look far more complicated, because cutting ICE production isn't as simple as flipping a switch. Entire supply chains depend on it. Millions of jobs. Decades of engineering knowledge. Factories designed around engines, gearboxes, fuel systems. You can't just replace that overnight with batteries and hope nothing breaks. And things are breaking. Battery costs remain high. Raw material supply is fragile and geopolitically risky. Charging infrastructure lags behind demand. Grid capacity is questionable. Cold weather, towing, long-distance travel all still expose weaknesses that marketing departments prefer not to talk about. So, while the public narrative screams end of combustion, the reality underneath is full of hesitation, compromises, and quiet extensions. Yes, production of traditional engines is being reduced. Yes, the pressure from eco-activists is real and powerful. And yes, the automotive world is changing faster than ever before. But this is not the clean execution people think it is. Not yet. And that's where the story starts to get interesting. It's easy to say the market decided or technology evolved. That sounds clean, almost natural. In reality, the main driver behind the Сокращение производства ICE is not demand. It's pressure, political pressure, regulatory pressure, social pressure. Eco-activist groups have learned a crucial rule. You don't need to convince engineers. You need to influence lawmakers and public opinion. Once regulations change, manufacturers have no real choice. Miss the fleet emissions target, pay billions in fines, fail to comply with future standards, lose access to entire markets. So automakers adapt. Not because combustion suddenly stopped working, but because it became legally and financially toxic. Look at what modern ICEs are forced to carry just to exist. Gasoline particulate filters, multiple catalytic converters, complex exhaust gas recirculation systems, dozens of sensors monitoring emissions in real time. All of this adds cost, weight, and failure points. Not to make the engine better for the driver, but cleaner on paper. And here's the irony. A well-maintained older engine can be mechanically simple, durable, and predictable. A modern, eco-compliant ICE is often none of those things. It's optimized to survive test cycles, not real life. Eco-activists don't see this side. or they choose not to. For them, nuance is inconvenient. The message must be simple. ICE bad, EV good. No middle ground. No transition phase. No acknowledgement that different regions, incomes, and infrastructures require different solutions. This absolutism is what really scares manufacturers. Not because activists are always wrong, emissions do matter. Climate is a real issue, but because the timeline is detached from engineering reality. Development cycles in the automotive world take years, sometimes decades. Regulations now move faster than platforms can realistically adapt. So brands respond with theater. They announce full electrification while quietly extending ICE platforms. They rename mild hybrids as electrified vehicles. They keep combustion alive under layers of marketing just to buy time. Meanwhile, production numbers tell a more subtle story. Yes, ICE volumes are being reduced, but they are not collapsing. In many markets, demand for combustion cars remains strong, especially outside major cities. Fleet buyers, long-distance drivers, cold climates, developing regions, EVs are not a universal solution yet. Manufacturers know this, which is why many of them are playing a double game. Publicly aligning with activists and regulators, privately hedging their bets, keeping combustion options alive for as long as regulations allow. The transition is happening, but not in the way the headlines suggest, and not at the speed activists demand. On paper, the transition to electric looks elegant. Zero tailpipe emissions, silent operation, fewer moving parts, instant torque. Governments love it. Activists celebrate it. Marketing teams build entire identities around it. But the real world is messy. And electricity doesn't magically erase physics, economics, or infrastructure limits. Start with batteries. They are heavy, expensive, and resource-intensive. Lithium, nickel, cobalt. These aren't abstract elements, they come from mines, often in politically unstable regions with environmental and ethical issues activists rarely like to mention. Battery prices have dropped, yes, but they are nowhere near cheap enough to fully replace ICE at scale without subsidies. And subsidies matter more than people admit. In many countries, EV sales collapse the moment incentives are reduced. That's not organic demand, right? That's artificial support. Manufacturers see this clearly. They know how fragile the current EV market really is. Then there's charging. Urban centers can adapt relatively fast. Private houses, garages, office chargers, manageable. But apartment blocks, old city infrastructure, rural areas, long-distance routes, that's a different story. Building a charging network isn't just installing plugs, it's upgrading grids, transformers, substations. This takes time, money, and political will. Now add climate to the equation. Cold weather reduces range. Heat degrades batteries. Towing kills efficiency. High-speed highway driving exposes limitations that WLTP and EPA cycles politely ignore. None of this makes EVs bad. It just makes them situational. And cars, historically, are not supposed to be situational. Internal combustion survived so long because it was flexible. Fuel anywhere. Predictable range. Fast refueling. Simple logistics. That robustness is exactly what electric struggles to replicate today. This is where the narrative starts to crack. Manufacturers aren't blind. Engineers aren't stupid. They see the gap between political targets and technical readiness, and they know that forcing a full switch too fast risks backlash, brand damage, and customer frustration. That's why hybridization exploded. Mild hybrids, full hybrids, plug-ins. They're not a half step, they're a survival strategy. A way to cut emissions without betting everything on batteries. A way to keep combustion relevant while buying time. Activists hate this. Regulators tolerate it. Customers quietly like it. Because it works. Which leads to an uncomfortable truth. If EVs were already perfect, no one would need to kill ICE by regulation. The market would do it naturally. The fact that it hasn't says a lot. Listen carefully to what car manufacturers say in public. You'll hear confidence, certainty, long-term visions. fully electric by 2035. No new combustion engines after 2030. The future is zero emission. Now look at what they do. They extend ICE platforms instead of killing them. They invest billions into new generations of engines labeled last ever. They redesign combustion motors to run on synthetic fuels, e-fuels, and alternative blends. They quietly push back deadlines the moment regulations allow it. This isn't hypocrisy, it's risk management. Automotive companies don't operate on Twitter timelines or activist slogans. They operate on product cycles, supplier contracts, and global market realities. When a brand sells cars in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America at the same time, a one-size-fits-all electric future makes no sense. Europe can push EVs aggressively. Other regions simply can't. Infrastructure, income levels, fuel availability, everything is different. Kill ICE globally, and you don't save the planet. You kill mobility for millions of people. Manufacturers know this. That's why combustion isn't disappearing. It's being reshaped. Smaller engines, higher efficiency, hybrid assistance, cleaner fuels, lower real-world emissions, not just test cycle numbers. This path isn't as dramatic as ICE is dead, so it doesn't get headlines, but it's far more realistic. There's also a political angle people underestimate. Governments want green optics. Automakers want regulatory stability. So they meet in the middle. Aggressive targets on paper, flexible implementation in practice. Loopholes, credits, transitional technologies, exceptions for certain classes and regions. This is how the industry has always worked, and it's why the doomsday narrative doesn't fully align with reality. Yes, production of classic, large displacement, naturally aspirated engines is shrinking. That era is fading, no question. But the idea that combustion will suddenly vanish is more activism than analysis. Behind closed doors, most manufacturers expect a mixed future, electric, hybrid, and combustion coexisting longer than people think. Not because they're nostalgic, because physics, economics, and customers demand it. From a distance, everything looks dramatic. Factories closing, engines banned, the death of petrol cars repeated like a mantra. But zoom in, and the picture changes. What we're actually seeing is not an execution, but a redistribution. Production shifts, not disappears. Combustion becomes more selective, more regulated, more expensive, but also more efficient and targeted. ICE is no longer the default for everyone. It becomes the right tool for specific use cases. Long-distance driving, heavy loads, cold climates, regions with weak grids, enthusiast segments, commercial fleets. These don't vanish just because an activist banner says they should. Even in Europe, where regulation is toughest, the system quietly allows exceptions. E-fuels gain legal recognition, hybrids remain. Deadlines are softened. Language changes from ban to phase out, and that difference matters more than people realize. Electric cars will grow rapidly. There's no denying that. They make sense in cities for daily commuting, for predictable routes. For many people, EVs will be better, simpler, and cheaper to live with, but they won't replace everything. The automotive future is not binary, it's plural. The real risk was never no more engines. The real risk was forcing a single solution onto a world that doesn't work in a single way. That's the mistake the industry is actively trying to avoid despite the noise. So yes, eco-activists have influence, a lot of it. They accelerated change, sometimes too aggressively, but they didn't rewrite physics, economics, or human behavior. Car makers didn't surrender, they adapted. And adaptation looks quieter than collapse. The age of combustion as the only option is ending. The age of combustion as a relevant option is not. Not yet. And likely not for a long time. Here's the uncomfortable conclusion no one likes to say out loud. If internal combustion engines were truly finished, no one would need to force their death. No bans, no emergency regulations, no moral pressure, no countdown timers. They would simply lose. That's how technologies usually die. quietly, naturally, because something better replaces them everywhere, not just on slides and in press releases. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening is a managed transition, carefully staged, politically framed, publicly dramatic, privately cautious. The industry is being pushed, not swept away. And the harder the push, the more obvious it becomes that the system isn't ready for a clean break. Electric cars are not a scam. They are not a failure. They are a powerful tool. In the right context, internal combustion engines are not saints. They pollute. They consume resources. They belong to an older technological paradigm. Both things can be true at the same time. The real future isn't electric versus combustion. It's electric plus combustion plus hybrids plus alternative fuels. A messy, inefficient human solution. Not the elegant one activists want, but the one reality allows. So yes, production of ICE is shrinking. Yes, the golden age is over. Yes, some engines will disappear forever. But the idea that petrol cars will suddenly become museum pieces is fantasy. What's ending is simplicity. What's ending is abundance. What's ending is cheap, carefree combustion. What's not ending is choice. And as long as people still value freedom of movement, flexibility, and independence from fragile infrastructure, combustion, in one form or another, will survive. Not because it's perfect, because the world isn't either.